Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode, Braelon Allen, running back out of Wisconsin. We're going to be talking about his production profile to kind of see who he compares to based on the data. One interesting fact about him is Allen is among 13 Wisconsin running backs to reach 3,000 or more yards in their collegiate careers. And how I do my grading, I do offensive market share scores. It's a raw statistic from school website or college football reference. You take that score and you transform it into a market share score by taking an individual statistic and then dividing it by the team total statistic. This statistic is then ranked against positional peers to get a percentile score, and that score is weighted against the age score of a prospect to give you the offensive market share score. Looking at his offensive market share scores, Braelon Allen had a 80 percentile in terms of his total offensive market share production score, 50 percentile in terms of his receiving market share production score, and a 89.57 in terms of his touchdown market share score. All those numbers are pretty decent, with the exception of his receiving market share score. But for the most part, he comes off as a pretty okay back in terms of his overall data. Going to running back efficiency scores. This is raw statistics, again, gathered from a school website or college football reference. The raw stats are then ranked against positional peers to get a percentile score, and that score is weighted against the age score of a prospect. And then touchdown percentage is the number of touches divided by total touchdowns, which gives you that particular metric. And what these two scores are measuring is the TD percentage is measuring how often this running back got into the end zone when he got the football in his hands. RRAV is rushing yards per touch. RAV is rushing yards per reception. So basically, RAV is how many yards they averaged when the ball was in their hands, when they caught it. And then RRAV is how many yards per touch they had. One thing about Braelon Allen is he was extremely efficient with the football. So despite the fact that he was not very good in terms of his receiving yardage market share, he did do pretty dang well in terms of his efficiency when the ball was in his football, was in his hands. Going back to, or at least going to adjusted production scores, adjusted production takes the age of a prospect, his market share score, strength of team, strength of schedule, and those other sort of metrics to give you an MSA rating. And then the pass score, it takes all of the market share scores plus efficiency scores to give you kind of like a total overall metric for it. Essentially, the pass score is like the gumbo metric. You take everything, throw it in the pot, and gives you a number. And all these scores essentially give you context for their production. So how productive was Braelon Allen in terms of his level of competition? How good was he in terms of his strength of team? And then, of course, how good was he in terms of his age, which he is also a pretty young prospect. Looking at his data, he was in the 99 percentile in terms of his age. His MSA rating was 78.27 out of 100, but his pass score was 89.35 out of 100, which is pretty impressive. And the reason why his pass score is higher than his MSA rating is that his efficiency scores are much higher. So even though he had some issues in terms of his overall data with his MSA, he makes up for it in terms of his efficiency. And those are what those two numbers kind of look at. Is one is including efficiency, the other isn't, kind of give me an idea of that kind of way. So it's a good thing that he's like this. And also, by the way, in case you didn't know, the data set I'm using for all the data that I just presented has 2,312 running backs since the 1969 NFL draft class. So it's a pretty big sample. Moving on to comparisons. This is by far probably the thing that most people just go to this part of the show anyways. Braelon Allen compares to a lot of NFL running backs. Jonathan Wells, also known as Beanie Wells, former Arizona Cardinal and Ohio State Buckeye. Tyler Algier, obviously Atlanta Falcons fame. Then, of course, you have Kenneth Walker III, currently on the Seahawks. Jamal Charles, everybody knows about him. From former Texan and Kansas City Chief, Clarence Farmer, Billy Sims, and Gaston Green. So a kind of decent mix of different running backs. A lot of these guys haven't played long enough to really give you a good outlook on them, but I think these are good comparisons for him because they all have similar weaknesses in terms of their play. So, for example, Beanie Wells was never that great in terms of, as a receiving back. Tyler Algier, that's kind of the biggest knock on him as well. And Kenneth Walker also has that issue in terms of, being a really efficient receiving back. But they can get it done. It's just that they weren't really used like that in their respective offenses, and that's kind of the thing that the data really says about him. Now, moving into his outlook, Braelon Allen profiles as a starter Pro Bowl running back based on his overall data. The biggest weakness is his average passing yardage market share. However, if he tests well, he will be right in line with elite backs like Jamal Charles. Otherwise, he will be closer to Beanie Wells and Kenneth Walker. Beanie Wells did have some other issues in terms of being kind of stiff as a running back, but I will tell you this much. If Braelon Allen tests amazingly at the combine, in terms of the short shoulder, the 3-cone, obviously a good 40-yard dash, I think it's a given that he's going to run 4.344. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. I'm pretty positive he's going to run that fast because he is somebody who has been clocked before and put up a really high time. Also on film, he looks fast as well. But that is kind of his profile in a nutshell. I think he's a back that does have some weaknesses to his game based on his production profile, but I think he has great efficiency. I think he has a great age, and I think he's somebody who may end up going in day 2 and end up having that Jamal Charles-like impact. Maybe not exactly the same as Jamal Charles, but could be in the same vein as like Kenneth Walker and these other sort of, run-heavy, touchdown-type running backs who may not get used in the receiving game as much, but you could still do stuff with them. So where he lands will be very important in terms of fantasy purposes. But if he goes somewhere where he's the only back, he's going to get a lot of touches. And let me tell you, man, he's going to put in the work. He really is. So with all that stuff out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching today's episode. My name is Jim Coburn. You can also follow me on Twitter at Jimetrics, at Jimetrics. You can also check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/jcoburn. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.